Before this message reaches its end, I need you to understand something very clearly, because what you are feeling right now is not random, and it is not meaningless, and it is not invisible to heaven. And if you are watching this at this exact moment, while your mind has been racing with worry, and your heart has been carrying silent questions that nobody else around you truly understands, then this message is not a coincidence but a confirmation, because God is speaking directly into the place where you almost gave up hope, and He is saying stop worrying, because even though you cannot see movement, even though nothing around you seems to be changing, even though the doors you expected to open are still closed and the answers you prayed for still seem delayed, I am already working behind the scenes in ways you cannot imagine. And what feels like silence to you is actually preparation happening in places your eyes cannot reach. And what feels like waiting to you is actually alignment happening in ways your mind cannot yet understand. And there is something powerful about this moment right now, because many people walk through seasons where everything feels uncertain and confusing and heavy, but very few recognize when God is quietly rearranging circumstances in their favor while they are still standing in the middle of what looks like delay and disappointment and unanswered prayer. But what you are standing in right now is not abandonment. It is not punishment. It is not failure. It is positioning. And the reason the pressure has felt so intense lately is because the breakthrough that is coming into your life requires a stronger version of you than the one that entered this season, and God has been strengthening your faith even when you thought you were losing it. And He has been protecting your future even when you thought nothing was moving forward, and He has been closing doors quietly because those doors were connected to paths that would have distracted you from the destiny that is still waiting ahead of you. And there were moments recently when you questioned whether your prayers were even being heard, because the timing did not make sense, and the silence did not make sense, and the struggle did not make sense, but heaven never stopped listening even for 1 second. And there were things happening in conversations you never heard, and opportunities being redirected in rooms you never entered, and protection being placed around you in situations you never even realized could have harmed you. And the truth is, sometimes the greatest evidence that God is working behind the scenes is the fact that certain plans failed even though you thought they were necessary for your happiness, because what you saw as loss was actually redirection, and what you saw as rejection was actually protection, and what you saw as delay was actually preparation. And right now there is something shifting quietly in your life, even if it does not look dramatic, even if nobody around you notices it yet, because heaven often moves in silence before it moves in visibility. And there are things aligning in your favor that you could not have arranged yourself even if you tried for years, and there are people being positioned into your future that you have not met yet, but they will recognize your value when the time is right. And there are opportunities being preserved for you that could not arrive earlier because you needed this season to grow into the person who can carry them without fear and without insecurity and without confusion. And I know there were nights recently when you felt exhausted from pretending everything was okay when it really was not, and there were mornings when you woke up carrying the same unanswered questions you carried the night before, and there were moments when you wondered whether things would ever change, or whether this heavy season would simply continue repeating itself again and again. But what you could not see during those moments is that heaven was already arranging the turning point that would shift everything in your favor at the exact time your strength almost reached its limit, because God never wastes your endurance, and He never ignores your persistence, and He never forgets the tears that nobody else saw, and He never overlooks the prayers you whispered when nobody else was listening. And there is something very important you need to understand right now, because worry has been trying to convince you that nothing is happening, but worry only speaks from what it can see, and faith speaks from what God has already started. And sometimes the reason your situation looks unchanged is because the change that matters most is happening inside you before it becomes visible around you, and the strength that has been growing quietly inside your spirit during this season is going to support blessings that would have overwhelmed you if they arrived earlier. And this is why heaven sometimes works behind the scenes longer than you expect, because God is not only preparing the blessing for you, He is preparing you for the blessing, and there are details being aligned right now that you would not even think to pray about because they are beyond what your imagination expected, but they are exactly what your future requires. And even though your timeline felt delayed, your destiny has never been delayed even once. And what is coming toward your life has already been scheduled in heaven long before you started worrying about how things would work out. And there is a reason this message reached you today, because the fear that has been whispering to you lately has been trying to make temporary uncertainty look permanent, but God is reminding you right now that temporary uncertainty has never been stronger than divine timing. And what looks slow from your perspective is actually precise from heaven's perspective. And there are moments when the greatest miracle happening in your life is not something visible, but something invisible protecting you from what you never needed to experience, and directing you toward what you were always meant to receive. And even now, while you are listening to this message, there are unseen movements taking place in your favor that will soon become visible in ways that surprise you, because when God works behind the scenes, He is not only preparing outcomes, He is preparing confirmations, and the confirmations that are coming into your life will make this season of waiting suddenly make sense in a way it never did before, and the same silence that once made you question everything will become the evidence that heaven was carefully arranging everything exactly the way it needed to happen at exactly the right time. Listen carefully, because this is the moment many people almost give up without realizing they are standing at the very edge of their breakthrough. And God is saying to you right now that the silence you have been experiencing was never His absence but His preparation. Because there are seasons when heaven works quietly behind closed doors while your faith is being strengthened in ways your eyes cannot yet see. And even though you felt ignored, delayed, overlooked, or forgotten, the truth is that God was rearranging situations, shifting hearts, blocking hidden dangers, and protecting you from paths that looked promising but would have destroyed your peace later. And you must understand that what feels like waiting to you often looks like positioning to God, because He never wastes your tears and He never ignores your prayers even when the answers arrive in unexpected timing. And the reason you are still standing after everything you faced is because His hand never left you for a single second, even when you thought you were walking alone. And right now God is asking you not to measure your future by your present struggle, because what you are experiencing today is not the final chapter of your story but only the narrow hallway that leads into a larger room prepared specifically for your purpose. And many people quit in this hallway because they mistake pressure for rejection, when in reality pressure is often the sign that something significant is about to shift in your life. And God wants you to hear this clearly, that the delays you cried over were actually divine protection, and the disappointments you questioned were actually redirections towards something stronger than what you originally asked for. And even though you wondered why doors kept closing in front of you, those doors were never meant to define your future but to refine your direction so that when the right door finally opens, it will lead you into peace instead of confusion, stability instead of chaos, and purpose instead of distraction. And the reason your spirit kept telling you not to give up even when everything around you looked uncertain is because God placed that strength inside you long before this season ever began, knowing you would need it right now. And what you thought was weakness was actually endurance growing quietly inside your heart. And what you thought was delay was actually alignment happening at the perfect moment. Because heaven does not move according to human panic, but according to divine timing that never arrives early and never arrives late. And God is saying that the struggle you survived already proved you are stronger than the obstacle you are facing now. And if He carried you through what almost broke you before, then He will absolutely carry you through what is in front of you today. And there is something powerful happening behind the scenes that you cannot yet see, but soon you will look back at this exact season and realize it was the turning point where everything began to change, even though nothing looked different at the time. And the reason the enemy tried so hard to fill your mind with doubt recently is because your breakthrough is closer than it has ever been, and fear always increases right before faith becomes visible. And God is reminding you that what belongs to you will not pass you by, and what is meant for your life cannot be stolen by delay, distraction, or discouragement, because when heaven decides it is your time, no obstacle on earth can stop what is coming toward you. And even now, while you are listening to this message, something is shifting in your favor that you cannot yet measure with your eyes, but your spirit can already feel it. And this is why you must keep trusting even when the path looks unclear, because faith was never meant to depend on visibility but on confidence in the one who sees the entire road ahead. And God is telling you not to interpret your quiet season as a forgotten season, because seeds grow underground before they ever appear above the surface. And what has been planted in your life through prayer, patience, and perseverance is already taking root in ways that will soon become visible evidence of His faithfulness in your story. And very soon the same situation that made you question everything will become the testimony that reminds you God was working the entire time, even when you could not hear His voice clearly. And when that moment arrives, you will understand why He asked you to hold on just a little longer, because what is coming next is not random, and it is not accidental, but carefully prepared with your name already written on it. And right now there is something powerful happening in your life that you cannot fully see yet, because God often does His deepest work in the hidden places of your story, where no one is clapping for you and no one is noticing your tears and no one understands the silent battles you are fighting at night. But heaven sees every moment you stayed strong when quitting felt easier. Heaven recorded every prayer you whispered when your voice was shaking. Heaven honored every time you trusted again, even after disappointment tried to convince you that trusting was pointless. And this is exactly why this season is not the end of your struggle but the turning point of your story, because when God prepares a breakthrough, He first prepares your heart to carry it without fear and without confusion, and without returning to the same patterns that once delayed your destiny. And that is why things had to slow down. That is why certain doors had to close. That is why certain people had to step away. Not because you were rejected, but because you were being redirected towards something stronger than what you were holding on to before. And the truth is, the delay you experienced was never punishment, it was protection. The silence you experienced was never abandonment, it was preparation. And the waiting you experienced was never wasted time, it was alignment with something bigger than what your eyes could see at the moment. Because sometimes God allows the storm to stay longer than expected, not to harm you but to strengthen the version of you that will walk into the next season with confidence instead of fear, and clarity instead of confusion, and peace instead of pressure. And what makes this moment so important is that you are closer than you think right now, even if nothing around you looks different yet, because breakthrough rarely announces itself loudly at the beginning, it usually arrives quietly through small shifts in your mindset. Small changes in your courage, small confirmations inside your spirit that tell you something is about to change. And if you have been feeling lately like you cannot go back to the old version of your life, but you also cannot fully see the new path ahead yet, then that feeling itself is confirmation that transition is already happening around you and inside you at the same time. Because God never moves you forward suddenly without first creating a separation between who you were and who you are becoming, and that uncomfortable space in between is not confusion, it is transformation. It is the moment where heaven is adjusting things behind the scenes in ways you cannot measure, but you will soon recognize when everything begins to connect in ways that finally make sense to your heart. And what you must understand right now is that your faith in this moment matters more than your circumstances, because circumstances change after faith stays steady, not before. And every time you choose to believe again, even after disappointment tried to silence your hope, you are proving that your spirit is stronger than your fear, and your future is stronger than your past, and your purpose is stronger than your pain. And this is exactly why the enemy tried so hard to exhaust you emotionally and distract you mentally and discourage you spiritually, because he knew that if you stayed consistent just a little longer, you would walk straight into the season that he was trying to delay. But what he did not realize is that God was using even the attacks against you to build the strength inside you that your next chapter requires. And now the same pressure that once tried to break you is actually becoming the evidence that something is shifting around you in ways you will soon recognize clearly. So do not stop now. Do not lose your confidence now. Do not let temporary uncertainty convince you that permanent change is not coming, because the truth is you are standing closer to your answered prayer than you have ever been before, and heaven has already started arranging things in your favor, even if your eyes have not seen the results yet. And the next step for you is not to figure everything out perfectly, but simply to trust one more time, believe one more time, pray one more time, stand strong one more time. Because sometimes your greatest breakthrough begins at the exact moment when you decide not to give up, even though giving up feels easier. And this moment right here is that moment for you. There is something very important happening in your life right now that you may not fully understand yet, because when God begins preparing a major shift in someone's life, He often allows a season where everything feels uncertain at the surface while everything is being rearranged behind the scenes in your favor. And this is the exact kind of season you are walking through, because the confusion you felt recently was not meant to stop you but to separate you from the old expectations that were too small for where God is taking you next. And sometimes the hardest part of transformation is not the change itself, but the moment when you realize you cannot return to the person you used to be, even though the new version of your life has not fully appeared yet. And that space in between is where faith becomes your strongest weapon, because faith is what keeps you moving forward when your eyes cannot yet see what your heart is beginning to feel. And the reason this moment matters so much is because heaven has already started aligning opportunities and connections and answers that match the future you have been praying for even before you understood what that future would look like. And what makes this powerful is that many of the struggles you thought were delays were actually divine adjustments that protected you from walking into situations that would have distracted you from your purpose and exhausted your strength before the right time arrived. Because God never removes something from your life without preparing something stronger to replace it, even if the replacement does not appear immediately. And that waiting space you experienced was not empty, it was full of preparation that your spirit needed so you could step into the next chapter without fear and without hesitation, and without carrying the same doubts that once slowed your progress. And the truth is, you have already survived seasons that once felt impossible, and the strength you gained during those moments is exactly the strength that is now opening the door for what is coming next, because the breakthrough you are approaching is not random, and it is not temporary, and it is not small. It is connected to prayers you spoke months ago, and sometimes even years ago, when you were asking God to change your situation without realizing He first needed to change your perspective so you could recognize the blessing when it finally arrived. And what is happening now is that your perspective has grown stronger, and your patience has grown deeper, and your faith has grown steadier, even though there were moments when you thought you were losing momentum. But what actually happened was that God was slowing things down so the foundation under your future could become strong enough to hold the blessing that is now moving toward you step by step. And this is why the resistance you felt recently was not a sign that something was wrong, but a sign that something valuable was close, because resistance often increases right before a breakthrough appears in someone's life. And if you look back carefully, you will notice that the challenges you faced recently were not random. They were shaping your courage and sharpening your clarity so that when the opportunity finally arrives, you will recognize it immediately instead of questioning whether you are ready for it. And the truth is, you are more ready than you think you are right now, because God never brings someone to the edge of their next season without first preparing their heart to walk into it with confidence instead of fear. And the quiet strength you have been building inside yourself during this season is proof that heaven has already trusted you with something greater even before it becomes visible around you. And what you must hold on to right now is the understanding that your story is still moving forward even when progress feels slow and answers feel delayed, because divine timing is never late and never confused and never careless. It is always precise and always intentional and always working for your good even when you cannot see the full picture yet. And the moment you choose to trust that truth again is the moment your spirit becomes stronger than your uncertainty, and your future becomes closer than your fear. So keep moving forward with confidence. Keep believing even when clarity feels incomplete. Keep trusting even when results feel invisible. Because what is being prepared for you right now is already closer than it appears, and the next chapter of your life is going to reveal why this season had to happen exactly the way it did. There is a reason you have been feeling different lately in ways you cannot easily explain to other people, because when God begins moving someone closer to a breakthrough, He first changes what they can tolerate, what they can ignore, and what they are willing to accept in their life. And that quiet shift inside your heart, where certain conversations no longer feel comfortable, certain environments no longer feel peaceful, and certain relationships no longer feel aligned, is not confusion but confirmation that you are stepping into a higher level of purpose that requires a stronger version of you than before. And even though this process sometimes feels lonely, it is actually one of the clearest signs that heaven is protecting your next chapter before it fully arrives. Because when God prepares something important for your future, He begins by removing distractions that once felt normal but would have slowed down the momentum of what He is about to do in your life. And the truth is, many of the changes you experienced recently were not losses, even though they felt painful at the time. They were adjustments that created space for something more meaningful to enter your story at the right moment. And this is why you may have noticed that the things that once excited you no longer bring the same energy, and the things that once held your attention no longer hold your peace, because your spirit is being guided towards something that matches the prayers you have been carrying quietly for a long time. And sometimes the hardest part of growth is trusting that what feels like distance right now is actually direction, and what feels like silence right now is actually preparation, because God often works in ways that are invisible before they become undeniable. And what you must understand in this moment is that your patience during this season has not gone unnoticed, and your consistency during uncertain days has not been wasted, and your faith during quiet nights has not been ignored, because every step you kept taking forward, even when you were unsure of the outcome, has been building the foundation for a breakthrough that is closer than you think right now. And the reason the pressure increased recently was not to stop you but to strengthen your confidence, so that when the opportunity arrives you will walk into it without hesitation and without fear of whether you deserve it. Because the truth is, you have been prepared for this moment longer than you realize. Even if the results are only now beginning to move toward you, and there were times when you thought you were falling behind while everyone else seemed to be moving ahead, but what was really happening was that God was positioning you carefully so that your next step would not just be progress but transformation. And transformation always requires separation from what is familiar before it reveals what is possible. And this is why the season you are in right now feels different from anything you have experienced before, because it is not just about changing circumstances around you, it is about changing the confidence inside you, so that when the door finally opens you will recognize that you are not walking into something random, but something that was prepared specifically for your journey and your purpose and your timing. And even though there were moments when doubt tried to convince you that nothing was changing, the truth is everything has been changing slowly and steadily in ways that are now beginning to connect together. And what you are feeling right now is the beginning of clarity returning to your path after a long season of uncertainty. And this clarity is not temporary, it is the signal that your next chapter is already forming around you even before it becomes visible in front of you. So do not let the memory of past disappointments convince you to expect another delay, because what is coming next is not another waiting season but a movement season where answers begin to appear and opportunities begin to align and confirmations begin to arrive at the exact moment you need them most. And the courage you have been building quietly inside yourself during this time is the exact strength that will carry you into the breakthrough that has been moving closer to you step by step, even when you could not see it yet. And this is why it is so important right now to keep trusting one more time and believing one more time and standing strong one more time, because you are not standing at the beginning of another delay but at the edge of a change that is finally ready to reveal itself in your life. There is something very powerful about the season you are walking through right now, because even though it may have felt slow and uncertain at times, the truth is that God has been quietly positioning pieces of your life together in ways that will soon begin to make sense to you. And what you once thought were random delays and unexpected interruptions were actually part of a careful preparation process designed to strengthen your spirit and sharpen your awareness, so that when the moment of change finally arrives, you will recognize it with confidence instead of hesitation. And this is why you may have noticed recently that your perspective has started shifting in ways that surprised even you, because the same situations that once made you anxious no longer control your peace, and the same doubts that once held your attention no longer feel as strong as they used to. And that shift inside you is not accidental, it is evidence that something new is already forming around you even before it becomes visible in front of you, because God always prepares your heart before He reveals your breakthrough, and He always strengthens your faith before He opens the door that leads into your next chapter. And what makes this moment so important is that you are closer than you realize to the answer you have been waiting for, even though there were times when it felt like progress had stopped completely. Because sometimes progress is happening in hidden places where it cannot yet be measured, but it can already be felt in the quiet confidence that begins growing inside you without explanation. And that quiet confidence you have been feeling recently is not imagination, it is confirmation that your life is moving in the right direction, even if the full picture has not appeared yet. And the truth is, many people turn back during seasons like this because they mistake silence for absence and waiting for rejection, but what they do not realize is that these are often the exact moments when heaven is working the hardest behind the scenes to arrange something that cannot be rushed and cannot be replaced by anything smaller than what was originally planned for them. And the reason this season required patience from you is because what is being prepared for your life is not temporary progress, but lasting change that will affect your future in ways you will recognize long after this moment passes. And even though there were nights when you questioned whether your prayers were being heard, the truth is that every prayer you spoke has already become part of the path that is now unfolding in front of you step by step. Because God never ignores sincere faith, and He never forgets consistent trust even when the results take time to appear. And what is happening right now is that the strength you build during your hardest days is becoming the foundation that supports the opportunity that is now moving closer toward you with perfect timing. And this is why it is so important for you not to lose your confidence at this stage of your journey, because the breakthrough you have been hoping for is not behind you, and it is not delayed indefinitely. It is already approaching you in ways that will soon become visible and undeniable. And the moment you continue trusting even when clarity feels incomplete is the moment your faith begins opening doors that fear could never unlock. And this is exactly why the pressure you experienced recently was not meant to stop your progress, but to prepare your courage so that when the change arrives you will step into it without hesitation and without second guessing whether you are ready for it. Because the truth is, you have been ready longer than you realize, and heaven has been aligning things around you longer than you could see. And now the season you are entering is not about waiting any longer, but about recognizing the signs that your next chapter has already begun forming around you quietly and steadily. And the more you choose to trust this process, the more clearly you will begin to see why everything had to happen the way it did, and why this moment in your life is not the end of your struggle, but the beginning of the breakthrough you have been moving toward all along. There is something deeply significant about the timing of your life right now because the season you are standing in is not ordinary, and it is not accidental, and it is not random. It is a carefully designed moment where everything you have walked through is beginning to connect in ways that will soon reveal why certain struggles had to last longer than you expected, and why certain answers arrived later than you hoped. Because sometimes God allows the waiting season to stretch longer than your comfort so that when the breakthrough finally appears, it does not just change your situation but transforms your confidence and strengthens your identity in ways that cannot be shaken again. And what makes this moment so powerful is that even though you felt uncertain at times, you never completely gave up and you never stopped believing that something better was still possible for your future. And that decision to keep trusting even when nothing around you looked different is exactly what prepared your spirit for what is now beginning to move toward you quietly but steadily. Because the truth is, breakthrough seasons rarely begin with loud announcements or dramatic signs, but instead they begin with small confirmations inside your heart that tell you something is shifting even before your eyes can see the evidence. And if you have recently felt a growing sense that you are not meant to remain where you are much longer, and that something new is forming just beyond what you can currently understand, then that feeling itself is not imagination but direction. It is the signal that your life is entering a transition that was planned long before you recognized it. Because God never moves someone forward suddenly without first creating an inner awareness that prepares them to step into change with confidence instead of fear. And the discomfort you felt recently was not a sign that you were losing stability, but a sign that your spirit was outgrowing a season that was never meant to hold you permanently. And sometimes the greatest evidence that your breakthrough is close is the realization that the old version of your life no longer feels like the place you belong, because growth always creates distance between who you were and who you are becoming. And that distance is not loss, it is progress, even when it feels unfamiliar at the beginning. And what you must understand right now is that the strength you built during your hardest days did not disappear, and the patience you practiced during your quietest nights was not wasted, and the faith you protected during your most confusing moments has already begun opening doors ahead of you that you could not have opened on your own. Because heaven has been working behind the scenes in ways that your eyes could not measure, but your heart was being prepared to recognize at exactly the right moment. And there were times when you wondered whether things would ever change, and there were moments when you questioned whether your effort was making any difference at all. But what you did not realize at the time was that those exact moments were building the resilience inside you that your next chapter requires, so that when the opportunity finally appears, you will not step into it with fear but with confidence and clarity and peace. And what is happening now is that the season of preparation is slowly giving way to the season of movement, where answers begin appearing more clearly and connections begin forming more naturally, and opportunities begin aligning more precisely with the direction you have been praying about for so long. And this is why it is so important for you to remain steady right now and not allow temporary uncertainty to convince you that permanent change is not coming, because the truth is the shift you have been waiting for is already closer than it has ever been before, and the next step in your journey is not about proving your strength anymore, but about trusting that the strength you already built is enough to carry you forward into the breakthrough that is now beginning to reveal itself in your life step by step, exactly when you are ready to receive it. There is a powerful reason why this season of your life feels different from anything you have experienced before, because what is happening right now is not just another temporary phase of waiting but the beginning of a transition that is quietly moving you into a place where your prayers, your patience, and your perseverance are finally starting to connect together in ways that will soon become clear to you. And even though there were moments when you questioned whether your effort was making any difference at all, the truth is that every step you kept taking forward during your most uncertain days has been building momentum toward a breakthrough that was always closer than it appeared. Because God never wastes the seasons where you feel unseen, and He never ignores the nights when you kept believing even while everything around you felt quiet and unchanged. And what makes this moment so important is that the strength you developed during those silent battles is now becoming the foundation that supports the opportunity that is moving toward you with perfect timing, even if you cannot yet see how everything is coming together. And sometimes the greatest evidence that change is near is the realization that the things that once held your attention no longer control your peace, and the situations that once created fear inside you no longer carry the same weight they used to. Because that shift inside your heart is not accidental, it is preparation for the next chapter that is already forming around you step by step. And there were moments when it felt like you were walking through uncertainty without direction, but what you did not realize at the time was that God was guiding you through a process that was strengthening your confidence and refining your focus so that when the right opportunity finally appeared, you would recognize it immediately instead of questioning whether it belonged in your life. And this is why the delays you experienced were never meant to stop your progress, but to position you correctly so that when the door finally opens, you will step into something that matches not only your hopes but also your purpose and your timing. Because divine timing never arrives early and it never arrives late, it always arrives exactly when your heart is strong enough to receive what you once prayed for during your most difficult moments. And what you must understand right now is that the patience you practiced during this season has already changed you in ways that are preparing you for something greater than what you expected at the beginning of this journey. And the quiet confidence you are beginning to feel inside yourself is not imagination, it is confirmation that your life is moving into alignment with the direction you were always meant to follow, even when the path ahead seemed unclear before. And sometimes the most important breakthroughs do not begin with dramatic changes around you, but with a calm certainty inside you that tells you something new is about to begin even before the evidence becomes visible in your circumstances. And what is happening right now is that your story is moving out of a season where you were learning patience and into a season where you will begin seeing progress more clearly and answers more quickly and opportunities more naturally than before. And this shift is not temporary. And it is not random, it is the result of the faith you protected during your hardest days and the strength you continued building even when results felt slow. And the reason it is so important for you to remain steady right now is because the moment you are standing in is not the end of your journey but the doorway into the next chapter that has been forming around you quietly for longer than you realize. And the more you continue trusting this process, the more clearly you will begin to see why everything had to happen the way it did, and why the season you once thought was delaying your progress was actually preparing the exact path that is now opening in front of you step by step with clarity and purpose and perfect timing that will soon become undeniable in your life.